That was awesome. Thanks, Amelia. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here with you in the room and you online. Such a privilege. I have known Mike and Christy for a number of years. They are dear friends, and I really love and appreciate them. I love your church. We pray for you often. As Amelia said, my name's Danielle Reeves, and I'm the lead pastor at Resilience Church, which is in Lakewood, Colorado. I was at Waterstone Community Church for 25 years, and then got the invitation to plant a church in the pandemic. That wasn't the original plan, but go big or go home. So we now meet, we are a church without walls. We meet in coffee shops and homes in the Lakewood area and beyond, and it has been amazing to see what God has done in and through his people, and the way that people from community, sometimes who have a hard time coming in to the church buildings that I've grown up in, there's something about a coffee shop that's closed that they'll come to. So excited to be here with you, proud to be part of the larger church family alongside of all of you. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about me and my family. I've been married to my husband, David, for 27 and a half years, and we have 4 kids, Cole, Brennan, Aubrey, and Micah. Cole is 24, it's hard to believe, Brennan 22, Aubrey 18, and Micah 16. We have a ton of fun in our family, and there is a ton of chaos in our family. 5 of the 6 of our family members have ADD. And if anyone in here has any experience with an ADD brain, whether it's your own or a family member or a friend, you know what that might be like. But for those of you who don't, imagine the movie Up and the dog in the movie Up, and you're trying to have a conversation and the other person is constantly going, squirrel, squirrel. That is our family all the time. Yeah, I find it pretty hilarious because I'm one of the ones that has ADD. My husband, David, finds it a little bit strange. We can have 30 conversations happen within a period of about 10 minutes, and he's still trying to catch up on the first one. So I still think it's a ton of fun. When they were little, it was a little bit more chaotic. There were a lot of surprises that happened. One of the surprises was Cole was about 6, Brennan about 4, and then the 2 little ones were pretty little. And so I was trying to get the little ones ready to go to church. And the older ones, I was hoping that they had gotten themselves ready. That's what the instructions were of the moment. And came downstairs ready to hop into the car to this image up here. So I looked at them and said, what is going on here? And I'm sure there was tone in my voice, and I'm positive there was a look on my face, because the oldest kind of looked at me and he's like, Mommy, we were drawing crosses all over our bodies because we love Jesus so much. Who can argue with that? Well, this balance between the joy and the chaos that happens within our family is true of us as a community as well. It's true of our society right now. We're in the middle of this pandemic. There are elements of joy. We're finding connections. We're looking at the things that matter to us. We're digging into those spaces, but we're also realizing that there's a lot of chaos in the world. So you all have been in the midst of this series called What's Your Witness? And as you've been walking through the last few weeks, you've really focused on this idea that being a witness is a noun and not a verb. It's not about going out and telling people things or preaching at them. It's really about how you live your life. It's about your transformation and being fully you, fully us, so that when we come in contact with our neighbors, those people that we live with, that we work with, that we rest alongside with, those geographical neighbors you talked about last week, when we come into that space, our witness becomes this thing that just kind of flows out of us. This love of Jesus flows out of us. And one of the things, as I was thinking about that and really thinking about, gosh, what would be beneficial to share with you this morning, I started thinking about this idea of chaos. And what in the world does it look like to be a good witness, to live our lives fully, to engage with people when our lives are chaotic? Or when their lives are chaotic. So I think that there are some opportunities for us in that space, because when we're willing to go to the hard places, it's an invitation to our neighbors to go to the hard places as well. So I want to invite us to look this morning at Psalm 125. Psalm 125, if you have an actual Bible and opening that is sometimes hard to figure out where to go. I know a lot of us have it on our apps, but if you have a physical Bible, it's about halfway in the middle, it's almost literally in the middle of the Bible. Psalm 125 is one of 13 Psalms of Ascent. So these Psalms of Ascent are these Psalms that these travelers, these Jewish travelers were traveling together, and they were on their way to Jerusalem. And they were called Psalms of Ascent because even though Jerusalem is actually lower geographically than the land surrounding it, it was considered ascending because it was considered to be God's place. It's his holy place. So Psalm 125 is one of these Psalms of Ascent, and it's a psalm or a song that was a community song. So it's not that we can't get value out of it as individuals, but I want you to just recognize that this was something that was sung and indicated or intended for us as a group, for a community to be saying together and singing together. So let me read Psalm 125 for us. And I pulled it out of the Message this morning because I really think that it captures some imagery that I love. Psalm 125. Those who trust in God are like Mount Zion. Nothing can move it. A rock-solid mountain you can always depend on. Mountains encircle Jerusalem, and God encircles his people. Always has and always will. The fist of the wicked will never violate what is due the righteous, provoking wrongful violence. Be good to your good people, God, to those whose hearts are right. God will round up the backsliders, corral them with the incorrigibles. Peace over Israel. So Psalm 125, if you think of when we read poetry in the English language, oftentimes they're broken into stanzas. So it may be that a poem has one feel in one stanza and then it kind of shifts to a different feel. This psalm does a similar thing. So it's really sectioned into three categories. So this first one are the first two verses. If you're looking at the NIV or the ESV in your Bible, it's going to be by verses. In the Message version, it's kind of the first couple of lines. But the first couple of lines really focus on God's support and protection. So it's this image of this mountain surrounding Jerusalem. And it kind of has these two implications. The first is that they compare those who put their trust in God to Zion Mountain. And it's this idea that if we put our trust in God, that we have this stability, that we're unshakable, that there's nothing that can knock us down. So it's this image of the strength that those who follow Jesus, that those who follow God, that those who put their trust in the God of the universe, the creator God, that we're unshakable. There's this unshakable element to that. That's one of the images. The second image is that the second part of the passage says this: just as the mountains encircle Jerusalem, so God encircles his people now and for all of time. So we were talking a minute ago about that image that Jerusalem sits on the shelf and then there's these mountains around it. So here's what I want us to imagine. I want us to imagine that we're traveling together to Pikes Peak. And as we're traveling, a couple of things are happening. There's this imagery of this mountain that we can literally see, and it's causing this conversation. One part of the conversation is that we have had generations before us tell us about who this God is, the faithfulness of this God. And so we're talking about that, and we're realizing that that's giving us strength. It's giving us something to lean into. And at the same time, we're looking at those mountains, and we're imagining Jerusalem and the higher mountains around, and we're recognizing that there's this imagery of God surrounding and embracing us. It's the image of a mother holding a child. It's that loving embrace. It's that protection. It's that caring. It's that he's going to do whatever he can to take care of his people. Here's the struggle with this imagery. Oftentimes, our understanding of who God is skewed. And so when we imagine God surrounding us, it might be that we're not really sure we want him to be our protector. Let me give us a couple of examples of why that might be the case. We attach our understanding of God's character to the people that surround us. So if we've had a father who is very angry and anything that we do, he's constantly waiting for us to mess up, it's very easy for us to think that that's how God works. If we have a mother who's controlling and says one thing and does another, it's very easy to attach that same characteristic to God. If we have a friend who tells us they're going to show up and then they don't again and again and again, and we're left feeling abandoned, it's very simple to think, well, gosh, that's how God works as well. We take our human interactions and those human characteristics, those human failures, and we attach them to God. The problem with that is that then when there's this imagery like this, when we're talking about this God that surrounds and protects, I don't know about you, but if I have to attach that image to some of my human relationships, that's not the relationship that I want. It's very easy to want to run away from that. So what we need to do is make sure that we have a right understanding of God's character, who he truly is. And I want to tell you a little bit about that. God is loving, he is caring, he is compassionate, he is just. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He's never changing. He's always stable. There's nothing that we can do or not do that will change those characteristics of his character. There's nothing that we can say, there's nothing that we can do, there's no sin that we can carry, there's no burden that we can have, there's nothing we can do as individuals, there's nothing we can do corporately that will ever change those characteristics of God. He doesn't change. So if we take that understanding of who God is and we place that on this image of the mother surrounding her child, then all of a sudden there's this hope and there's this tenderness and there's this recognition that there is this person that loves me so much. There is this creator that loves me so much that even though my human relationships have brokenness to them, I have hope in this relationship in who God is. That's the first portion of our journey together towards Pikes Peak, is we're recognizing what God's character is like, and we have this imagery of the mountains to remind us of that. Second section is the very middle. So again, if you're looking at the message, it's going to be Psalm 125:3 if you're in NIV, but smack dab in the middle. Second section says this: the fist of the wicked will never violate what is due the righteous, provoking wrongful violence. This right here is the psalmist's cautious confidence in God. So here he or she has heard about for generations that God is this loving, protective, gracious, compassionate, just God. So there's this intellectual belief in that, but then there's this human doubt. There's this wrestling between what's known and what's experienced. It's one of the things I love about the Psalms. I think the Psalms are so incredibly human and honest. And oftentimes we'll see this ebb and flow. We'll see this place where the psalmist seems really confident, and then all of a sudden there's this doubt, and then there's confidence. But what I love about it is that it invites us into the story. It invites us to recognize that we too may have intellectual understanding of who God is. We can talk about the characteristics that I just mentioned, and it doesn't mean that that's how it feels, and that that's okay, that that's normal, that there's nothing wrong with us when we get to those places of doubt. So in this case, what the psalmist is really talking about is this honest assessment. What does it look like to just be open and honest with God? If nothing we say or do can change his character, he's big enough for us to have doubts and questions. Years ago, before our 4 kids were born, we had a son whose name is Aiden, who died of a heart defect when he was an infant. And it was the most traumatic, life-changing, faith-questioning time of my life to date. It was this time where I had the intellectual information about who God is, and I wanted to believe it, but I didn't feel it. The question that I had again and again and again was, why would a God who is good and compassionate and gracious and all-knowing and all-powerful not take care of my baby, not take care of my son? There's actually a Barna study that shows that a majority of the people who have a hard time taking a step of faith towards God is because they're asking those same questions. What do we do with a good God who allows hardship to happen? I'm not here today to try to solve that because it's a really big question, and I'm not sure we'll truly understand until we're face to face with Jesus. What I am here to suggest is that there's a lot of power in honesty. There was a lot of power in me having that chance to get to question God. It actually took me to a place where my belief and faith in him was deeper, not more shallow. It gave me the space to ask the hard questions. It gave me the chance to relate to a Jesus who himself said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" What I love about this psalm is that the psalmist, in the middle of this journey towards Jerusalem, in the middle of our journey towards Pikes Peak, there's this opportunity to say, I see the evidence of who you are. I see it in your creation. I know it in your stories. I understand that you're the God that surrounds. But in my heart, I don't feel it. I don't feel it in my being. And yet we know that God continues to love and care for us. There's a power to getting to do that as a community. And that's what I love about the idea of neighboring. It's this idea of getting to do life together, not just in the walls of this family that's here, but extending that opportunity beyond. That's really what kind of this last section of the psalm talks about. It gives us an opportunity to look at this community opportunity. Final section of Psalm 125 is a declaration of peace. Be good to your good people, God, to those whose hearts are right. God will round up the backsliders, corral them with the incorrigibles. Peace over Israel. This here is a statement in the faith of who God is. So think back, the Psalms were written before Jesus existed. So in this psalm, the people that were traveling together have this hope in this promised Messiah. They have this hope that even though they're traveling in the midst of hardship, that there's something more that's coming. What I didn't tell you earlier about these travelers is that most of them are in situations where they're being oppressed, where they're on the fringe, where violence is happening against them. These are people who aren't just having this intellectual conversation about hardship, they're actually experiencing it as they're walking to celebrate who God is. So in the midst of this hardship and this communal lament, there's this place to say we trust in something we can't see and we can't touch, but we believe with our full beings that even though we don't understand it, there is this promised Messiah that's going to come and he's going to turn the world upside down. He's going to come and establish his kingdom here on earth. What we get to see is that happened. And that while he came to establish his kingdom here on earth, we still live in the now and the not yet, where the world is broken, where sin occurs, where hardship is happening, where grief is all around us, where a pandemic is taken over the entire world, where we've lost people that we've loved, where we're not sure which way is up, where we feel disoriented. And yet he's here with us, his presence is here, and he will return again one day to restore all things back to the way they were intended to be. That's the hope of traveling together. That on the day that I can't remember because I'm stuck in my grief, and it's okay that I'm there, that you may be able to say, I don't get the grief, I don't understand why it's hard, life is brutal at times, but let's keep walking arm in arm towards this mountain. There may be another day where you say, I can't go another step, I don't have anything left in me, and I can say, I'm with you. Let's keep one more day, one day at a time, one step at a time. Let's keep going. There's this mountain that's ahead, and we can't see it quite yet, but it's on the tip of our tongues, and I feel like it's right there. Let's keep going. We believe in this God who's going to fulfill the things that he said he would fulfill. Together, when we link arms, we're able to trust in this bigger story, this story of redemption, this story of reconciliation. This story that doesn't end here, that has this extension beyond where true restoration happens. It's in this place that we see the power of neighboring. That it's not too late, it's not too early, it's just the right time to walk this journey, not only with each other, but with our neighbors, and with our friends, and with our coworkers. People don't have to be where we want them to be. That becomes that verb sense of being a witness. If we show up fully as we are, it gives other people permission to show up fully as they are. And you know, Jesus invites everybody to the table. So what if we become a community of people that are willing to share vulnerably, that are willing to look at the pain in our own lives, the wrestlings that we're having, the chaos that's in front of us? What if we're willing to do that? And then what if we take the risk and say it out loud? And what if that becomes an opportunity for our neighbors and our friends who maybe don't know who God is at all, to see that it's okay to be honest, that the God we serve isn't asking us to come with everything put together. He's asking us to come as the full mess that we all are. What if that becomes the witness? That the witness is that as Jesus invites everyone to the table, he invites us in the mess. We don't have to shower. We don't have to get rid of the stuff that we're dealing with. We can't get rid of it anyway. He loves us just as we are. What if this season and this psalm and this mountain and this image of our backyard, where Pikes Peak is literally in view, what if that becomes our daily reminder of a God that embraces us and is steady and stable, even on the days that our life is out of control? And what if that then bleeds out to those that we're surrounding? What if our witness is all about sitting in the junk with people because that's what Jesus does with us? There is a huge opportunity for us as followers of Jesus, as these people pursuing who he is, to be fully us, all the pluses, all the minuses, all the joys, all the fears, all of it, and to get to do life alongside of our neighbors because that's what they're experiencing. That's the invitation I want to give us. That we see this Psalm 25 and we get again and again this message that even though there is chaos all around, there is a God who represents stability and continuity, who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So here's our challenge for us. Oftentimes, for me, when I am thinking about something or I hear something or we're flipped and I'm sitting where you're sitting, I'm taking in this information, I'm thinking about it while I'm in the room, and then I walk out of the room and then I'm thinking about 50 other things. Part of that might be my ADD brain. Maybe you only think about 12, but I think about 50. And it's really hard then to figure out, how do I take this and integrate it into my life? So I want to give us an opportunity. Before I give it to us, I want to tell you about a study that was done in Britain. So there was a study done around exercise. And so they had 3 different groups, and the goal was to get them to exercise every day for a month. Maybe it was 5 days a week for a month. Let's say 5 days a week for a month. Group 1, all they said to them was, we want you to exercise 5 days a week for a month and then report back. Group 2, same instructions, but then they gave them motivational videos, audio, really pumped them up. Like, we're going to motivate you to go and get this done. Third group, they didn't give any motivation to, but they said, here's the deal. We want you to write down when you're going to exercise, where you're going to exercise, what time you're going to exercise, what kind of exercise you're going to do. Group 1 was, once they reported back, group 1 was successful 36% of the time. 36% of people were successful. Group 2 were successful 34% of the time. I think it's fascinating that the statistic went down. Like, I always think, well, if we motivate each other, we'll for sure get it done. But it went down. I don't know. Maybe those people are rebellious like me, like, well, don't tell me what to do. But it went down. Group 3 was successful 95% of the time. It went from 35% to 95%. I think there's a really valuable lesson in that for us when it comes to when we come to church and we're learning these things, these rich information about who God is, that if we walk out and we have no plan, or if somebody sits up front and motivates us to do the plan, those things are good, but what's really where the rubber meets the road is when you create intentionality. So I want to encourage you to create intentionality around 3 questions. So oftentimes we say, put your phones away. I actually want you to get your phones out, or a piece of paper and a pencil, because I've got 3 questions I want to encourage you to wrestle with this week. If you're online, same thing. Take a picture. You're not off the hook just because you're online. Take a picture, write it down, same thing. We see you. All right, so here are the 3 questions. Where is there hardship or chaos in your life? What are you doing to ease the pain or discomfort of that hardship? And what might it look like to depend on God's character instead? As you're jotting that down, a couple notes on this. First is this: until we're honest with ourselves about where the hardship or chaos is in our lives, it's really hard for us to be honest with others. And oftentimes for me, that comes from a place of shame. I feel ashamed admitting that I'm struggling. So there's an opportunity for us to wrestle with that. Where does that shame come from? Whose voice is in our head? What if we replace that voice with the loving character of God? So I want to name that first. Second thing I want to name, that second question around what are you doing to ease the pain or discomfort of that hardship? It is natural and easy to fill our discomfort with other things, which is why the psalmist in that middle of that psalm was praying for strength to avoid the evil and the temptations around. So here are some of the things I fill my life with: busyness, an extra glass of wine. I can be over helpful at times. That makes me kind of numb how I'm feeling. I can be under helpful at times. I think we can put our trust in relationships, some that are healthy and some that aren't. I think that we can put our reliance on our pastors. I think we can put our trust in our scientists. I think we can put our trust in our whatever, all different things. And let me be clear, I'm not negating any of those things. I have a ton of trust in science and in medicine and in everything else. So that was not a political statement, just to be clear. What I am saying is that we all fill our lives with things. And when we fill our lives with things, that's natural, but it also pulls us away from filling our lives with God. So that question is really intended for us to think about, what do we fill our lives with? Not in a place of shame. As soon as we go to shame, then we shut down and tend to fill it with more junk. But really with this open-handedness. We're human. We're not going to get this right 100% of the time. That's not the goal. We're just supposed to do the best that we can to follow Jesus is in the mess that we are. But there's freedom in looking at what we're putting our trust in. Okay, so that's the second one. And then the third one, what might it look like to depend on God's character instead? Again, what I'm not saying is that if you just put your trust in God, all of life is better. That's not real and it's not true. And we see that again in this psalm. Their circumstance didn't end. Just because they're traveling together and they're trusting in who he is, they're still oppressed. They're still facing injustices. There's still people dying. There's 100% statistic on the fact that we're dying, right? There's nothing that we can do that's going to make that hardship go away. But that trust in God gives us hope. It gives us something to hold on to so that we're not just in this chaotic place where we're like, I have nothing. I don't even know how to get up the next day. So I'm not recommending or suggesting that we take things that are good in our life and say we don't need them, like medicine. We need medicine. I'm not saying we get rid of those things. What I am saying is we need to pay attention to when we're relying on other things in place of God and just name it and own it. All right, so that's your assignment. Okay, so you just took a picture of it. So now you need to create intentionality, right? Because if you just took the picture, that's just really the motivation piece. So what I want to encourage you to do today, before noon, is write down, when are you going to look at these questions? Pick a day, pick a time. I don't care if you journal it, you can write it in your phone, you can think about it, but really want to encourage you to do that. Because as we know, that's when transformation happens. And I know that you are a church of transformation. So Thank you for spending this morning with me. It just is a gift to get to walk this journey with you. I love that we, again, are linking arms and the opportunity to remember this Psalm 125, that in the midst of the chaos of the world and everything that's happening, that God is faithful, that he can be trusted, that he is good and gracious and kind and compassionate and just. And so may we be a people that trust that and believe it and lean into it. Let me pray for us, and then we'll continue in worship. God, thank you that you are a God who loves us, that you are a God of justice, that you are a God of consistency. God, thank you that you are a God who never changes, and thank you that we happen to live in a place where that visual of the mountain that is unchanging is right in front of us. God, may we be reminded each time we look out our front doors, each time we're driving down the highway, each time Pikes Peak or Longs Peak or any of the mountains in our area come in front of us, may we be reminded of the strength and the sturdiness that you give us as we trust in you, but of the way that you surround us with your love and your compassion. God, may we be a people that are honest with our wrestlings, honest with our joys, recognizing that we have pluses and minuses and that you love us just as we are. And may we be a people who communicate the same to our neighbors, that we live fully as we are so that we give them the freedom and the permission to live fully as they are, knowing that you take us in, you invite us to your table just as we are. God, we love you and we are grateful for you. We pray these things in your name. Amen.